The first thing Amara felt was pain. A dull ache throbbed between her thighs, strange and unfamiliar, radiating through her body with every shallow breath. Her body, hers, usually untouched, usually safe, felt different. Heavy. Marked. As though something had been taken that she could never reclaim. Her eyes snapped open. Her chest heaved, breath sharp and uneven, the panic rushing through her veins even before her surroundings sharpened into focus. The ceiling above her wasn't hers. Her own was low, plain white, with cracks running through it, the kind you stared at during sleepless nights in her tiny dorm room. But this one was high, pristine, etched with faint golden patterns that caught the glow of the dim light. It stretched like a silent witness to something she couldn't yet name. Amara turned her head slowly. She lay on a bed far too soft, her bare skin wrapped in sheets smoother than anything she had ever touched. The fabric whispered against her trembling body, taunting her with its luxury. The air was thick, scented with expensive whiskey, faint smoke, and something else, an intoxicating masculine presence that clung to the room like a shadow. Her lips parted, her pulse thundering in her ears. This wasn't her room. This wasn't her world. And then she froze. He was beside her. The man. He lay on his back, the sheets draped low across his waist. His chest was bare, muscles carved with ruthless discipline, bronze skin painted with ink. And right across that chest bloomed the mark that turned her blood to ice, a black rose, its thorns curling downward, dripping with crimson droplets etched like blood. Her stomach dropped. She had seen enough to know what it meant. Soul whispered his name like a curse. The Black Rose. The ruthless Mafia lord who moved in shadows, who controlled more than politicians dared admit, who made entire families disappear with a snap of his fingers. And she was in his bed. Her breath quickened, panic rising in sharp, ragged gasps. This wasn't a mistake she could laugh away. This wasn't a misunderstanding she could escape. Her gaze flicked to his face. Even in rest, he radiated danger. A sharp jawline cut like steel. Dark brows furrowed in dreams she could only imagine. Dreams of violence, of control, of victory. His lips, slightly curved upward, carried the faintest smirk, as though even in sleep he never lost. His beauty was cruel, the kind that drew you close only to burn you alive. Amara's hands clutched the sheets tighter to her chest, her knuckles white with strain. 1,000 questions crashed in her skull. Where am I? How did I get here? What happened? The ache between her legs answered the one she least wanted. Her throat closed, a sob caught somewhere between denial and despair. No, her whisper cracked in the heavy silence. Her body shook. Her clothes, where were they? Flashes slammed into her head. A hotel lobby. Music that throbbed through her bones. Too many men watching her. Her heart pounding as footsteps chased her down endless hallways. A door. Darkness. A stranger's shadow. And then nothing. Blank. She squeezed her eyes shut, as though if she pressed hard enough, she could reverse time. The rustle of sheets snapped her back. Her heart stilled. She turned her head. His eyes were open now. Dark. Piercing. They locked onto her with unnerving stillness, pinning her down more effectively than chains. No confusion. No regret. No apology. Only recognition. A smirk stretched across his lips. Slow. Deliberate. Predatory. So, he murmured, voice deep and husky, dripping with the weight of command. You're awake. Amara's throat dried instantly. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She wanted to scream, to demand, to beg, but her voice betrayed her, stuck in her chest. He sat up, unhurried, powerful. The sheets slid down, bearing more of his torso. Ink sprawled across his skin, dragons, roses, symbols she couldn't understand, woven into the larger mark of the Black Rose. A body carved not just by discipline, but by violence. Amara's body recoiled instinctively. Dabuch, where am I? Her voice broke, strangled with fear. What happened? He tilted his head, studying her with unsettling patience, as though she were an object of curiosity rather than a human being. His gaze lingered, sharp and deliberate, traveling from the trembling hands clutching the sheets to her terrified eyes. "You don't remember?" His tone was smooth. Too smooth. Her heart clawed at her chest. "Tell me this didn't happen. Please," her voice shook. "Tell me nothing happened." He rose to his feet. Slowly. Intentionally. He towered over her now, his shadow falling across her body, filling the room with a suffocating presence. Every step he took felt like a verdict. Then he crouched, close enough that she could feel his breath against her ear. It happened. Amara flinched, her chest tightening as though the words had cut her open. He narrowed his eyes, watching the tears she fought to hold back. His lips curved into something dangerous, something final. And now, his voice was silk laced with steel. "You're mine." A tear slipped down her cheek. She wanted to scream that she wasn't, that she never would be, that this was wrong. But her body betrayed her, frozen, trembling, her limbs refusing to obey. With effort that scraped her soul raw, she forced herself to move. She slid off the bed, clutching the sheet to her chest. Her bare feet hit the cold marble floor. The room was vast, too luxurious, gilded with shadows. Gold-trimmed curtains hung heavy over glass windows. Expensive liquor bottles gleamed on the shelf. Everything screamed wealth, power, control. Everything screamed him. Her eyes found her dress, crumpled on the floor near a leather couch. She lunged for it, fumbling with shaky hands as she pulled the fabric over her body. Her fingers trembled as they tugged the zipper, tears blurring her vision. He didn't move. He stood with arms crossed, eyes glinting with a predator's patience. Watching. Waiting. He didn't need to stop her. His words already bound her more tightly than chains. When she finally stumbled toward the door, his voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Run if you want, but remember this." She froze. His gaze locked onto hers, dark and unrelenting. Once the black rose touches something, he paused, his smirk sharpening. It never lets go. Amara's breath caught. His words sank into her bones, cold and poisonous, a vow she could feel deep in her marrow. Her trembling hand found the doorknob. She flung it open and fled, her footsteps echoing down the endless hallway. Her chest burned, her mind screamed, but only one thought roared louder than the rest. What have I done? The night before had not been meant for her. Amara had no business in a hotel like this, its chandeliers dripping with crystal, its floors polished so smooth they mirrored the movements of Seoul's elite. She didn't belong among the men in tuxedos and the women shimmering in diamonds. Yet here she was, balancing a silver tray of champagne flutes, her black serving dress clinging uncomfortably to her skin. It was supposed to be simple. One shift. One paycheck. Enough to cover the overdue electricity bill in her cramped Gwanakdong apartment and maybe send something small back home to Nigeria, where her younger siblings still needed school supplies. Her roommate, Mina, had convinced her. "Rich people tip big," she had said with a grin. "One night here is like a week at the cafe." But as Amara moved among the glittering crowd, every instinct screamed she had made a mistake. The party wasn't just luxurious, it was strange. Too quiet beneath the laughter. Too sharp behind the smiles. The men in tuxedos didn't just carry themselves with wealth, they carried themselves with power. Dangerous power. Their eyes tracked the room like predators surveying prey. And everywhere, standing too still, too broad-shouldered to be ordinary staff, were men in black suits. Security. Or something more. Amara kept her head low. She had learned quickly in Seoul that being noticed was rarely good. People already stared at her enough, her dark skin, her accent, her foreignness. Some with curiosity, some with disdain, some with an interest that made her skin crawl. She couldn't afford trouble tonight. She just needed to serve, collect her pay, and disappear. But trouble found her anyway. A hand brushed her hip as she squeezed between tables. She stiffened, nearly spilling the champagne. "Pretty girl," a man's voice drawled behind her, Korean thickened by whiskey. "Too pretty to be carrying drinks." She turned, forcing a polite bow. The man was in his 40s, hair slicked back, eyes glinting with entitlement. "I'm working, sir," she murmured in careful Korean. His smirk deepened. "Then work for me."
"Sit."
"I'll pay you better." Her stomach twisted. She bowed again, firmer this time, and hurried away. But the ballroom was a maze, and predators circled everywhere. Another man, younger but with the same sharp edge, caught her wrist as she passed. "Where are you going in such a hurry?" His grin was too wide, his grip too tight. "I need to refill the drinks." Her voice cracked in her throat. "Stay." He pulled her closer. "Smile for me, and I'll buy the whole tray." The glasses rattled. Her pulse spiked. She yanked her arm free, ignoring his curse as she darted into the crowd. Her tray clattered onto a table as she fled. She didn't care anymore. She just needed out. Her feet carried her down a side hallway, away from the music and laughter, her breath ragged. The sound of footsteps echoed behind her. 2, maybe 3. They were following. Her chest tightened. Not again. Not here. Doors lined the hallway, most closed, some guarded by unsmiling men. Her heels clicked too loudly, each step a beacon. Then ahead an open door.
She didn't think.
She just slipped inside, shutting it softly behind her. The silence was immediate, heavy. She pressed her back against the door, trembling. The suite was dim, lit only by a single lamp that cast golden shadows across polished wood and leather. Expensive whiskey scented the air, mingled with smoke. She closed her eyes, willing her heartbeat to slow. Just until they pass. Just for a moment. "You're late." The voice cut through the stillness. Low,
Deep.
accented. Her eyes flew open. A man sat in the corner, half hidden in shadow, a glass of whiskey in his hand. His eyes, dark, sharp, unreadable, locked on hers instantly. Amara froze. I'm sorry," she stammered, words tumbling out in broken Korean. "I came to the wrong room. I'll go." She turned for the door, but before her hand touched the knob, he was there. He moved like shadow, silent and swift, his body suddenly close enough to block her escape. His hand pressed against the door above her head, trapping her without touching her. "Wait." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried command, the kind that coiled around her spine and rooted her in place. Her breath hitched. Her eyes darted to his chest, where his shirt hung open just enough to reveal black ink etched into his skin. A rose.
Dark. Thorned.
Her blood ran cold. Her roommate had whispered about him. Everyone had. The Black Rose. A name that traveled through soul like smoke, never spoken too loudly. A Mafia lord, ruthless and untouchable. And she had run straight into his room. Her lips trembled. Pleased it was a mistake. "I didn't mean." The tray slipped from her hands, champagne glasses shattering against the carpet. The sharp sound made her flinch. He didn't. He only tilted his head, studying her as if she were something curious, something amusing. "You don't know who I am?" he asked in smooth English now, his accent subtle but clear. She shook her head rapidly, too afraid to answer. His smirk deepened. "Good. Then you'll remember me this way." The room spun. The shadows pressed closer. Her fear blurred into something heavy, suffocating, as his eyes held hers captive. And in that suffocating silence, the wrong room became the mistake that would change her life forever. The morning after should have been ordinary. Amara should have woken in her tiny apartment on the south side of Seoul, where the walls were too thin, the heater rattled through winter nights, and the streets below smelled of fried food and cigarette smoke. She should have dragged herself out of bed for her part-time shift at the cafe, rushing to make it before her boss docked her pay again. She should have been anonymous, invisible, like she had been for months. But nothing was ordinary anymore. She woke instead in her dorm room, hours later than usual, her head buried beneath a pillow. Every muscle ached, her body reminding her of the night she desperately wished she could forget. Her roommate, Mina, was gone, her bed already neatly made, a note scribbled in Hangul left on the desk. Out at the library. "Don't forget rent is due tomorrow." Amara stared at the note until her vision blurred.
Rent.
Classes.
Work.
bills. All the little pieces of her survival here in Seoul. How could she focus on any of that when her body still carried the echo of him? She pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. No one could know. If she could bury it deep enough, pretend hard enough, maybe it would vanish like a nightmare at dawn. But by afternoon, whispers had already begun. At the cafe where she worked evenings, 2 Korean students lingered near the counter, their eyes darting toward her as they sipped lattes. "Is that her?" one murmured in Korean.
Yeah.
"The Nigerian girl. I heard she was seen leaving Hotel Jinhee with him." The other girl's eyes widened. "The Black Rose? No way." Amara's stomach dropped. Her hands trembled so badly, she nearly spilled the cappuccino she was serving. She kept her head down, praying they would stop staring, but their whispers clung to her like smoke. By the time she left work, the city felt different. Men in dark suits lingered at corners, their gazes sharp and unblinking. When she hurried toward the subway, one of them fell into step behind her. Not close enough to touch, but near enough to remind her he was there. Her pulse raced. Were they following her? Watching her? The next day, again, she noticed them.
Different men, same black suits.
At the grocery store, near her university gates, even outside her apartment building at night. It didn't feel like protection. It felt like surveillance. But Seoul was a city that thrived on gossip, and the whispers grew louder by the day. "She's his mistress." "No, she's just another girl he'll throw away." "Why her? She's not even Korean." Every word cut deeper than the last. She had worked so hard to stay invisible, to survive quietly. Now, suddenly, her foreignness was a spotlight, burning too bright. Then came the pendant. It appeared 3 days later, slipped into the worn fabric of her school bag. Amara only found it when her fingers brushed something cold and metallic at the bottom. She pulled it out and froze. A pendant. A rose. Black, carved with impossible detail, its petals edged in silver, its stem etched with thorns. Her breath caught. She had seen that symbol before. On his chest. In her nightmares. Her fingers shook as she clutched it, heart thundering in her ears. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a message. And she didn't need anyone to explain it. In Seoul's underworld, marks carried weight. A pendant from the Black Rose wasn't a gift. It was a claim. It declared her untouchable, not because she was safe, but because she was his. Amara's throat tightened. Her first instinct was to throw it away, to hurl it into the nearest trash bin, to pretend it had never touched her skin. But as she stood in the crowded subway station, the pendant heavy in her palm, she felt eyes on her again. The suited men. Watching. Waiting. She closed her fist around it, trembling. Her life was no longer hers. That night, sleep refused to come. Amara lay in her narrow bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, the pendant glinting faintly on her desk beneath the weak light. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his tattoo, his smirk, his whisper, "You're mine." Tears slipped silently down her cheeks. She had left Nigeria for Seoul to escape the shadows of her past, to chase knowledge, to build a new life. She had believed distance could protect her. But now she had stumbled into a darkness deeper than any she had imagined. The city outside her window pulsed with life, neon lights, laughter, music spilling from bars. Seoul had never looked so alive, so indifferent. And she had never felt so trapped. The city never truly slept. Seoul at night glowed with neon, buses still rattling through the streets, and clusters of students laughing outside convenience stores. For Amara, it was both a comfort and a curse. A comfort because she was never truly alone. A curse because she couldn't hide from herself. 3 days had passed since the night she woke in that hotel room. 3 days of sleepless nights. 3 days of trying to convince herself it hadn't happened. 3 days of scrubbing herself raw under scalding water that never washed away the memory. Her classmates at the university noticed her distraction. She told them she was tired, overworked. It wasn't a lie. She had been working late shifts at a restaurant to pay rent, but now every shadow made her heart race, every loud voice made her flinch. She told herself it was over. She had left that hotel. She had sworn never to set foot near that world again. But the world had a way of circling back. The first time she saw him again, it was in broad daylight. She had been walking to class, balancing her books and clutching a coffee cup too hot for her fingers. The campus courtyard was filled with students rushing to lectures, laughing, scrolling through phones. She felt almost safe. Then she saw him, leaning casually against a sleek black car at the far edge of the courtyard. Sunglasses covered his eyes, but she knew. The line of his jaw, the posture that radiated command. Her steps faltered, her chest tightened. What was he doing here? This was her world, not his. As though sensing her, he lifted his head. Even behind the tinted lenses, she felt his gaze pierce straight through her. The smirk that curved his lips was subtle, but it froze her blood. She spun on her heel and rushed inside the building, her legs trembling. The second time, it was at the restaurant where she worked. She had just finished carrying trays of food to a table of businessmen when the door opened and he walked in. Not alone, flanked by two men in black suits, their presence filling the small space like smoke. Her tray slipped from her fingers, crashing to the floor. Heads turned. Her boss glared. But Jaewon? He only smiled, slow and deliberate, like he enjoyed her reaction. She hid in the kitchen, her hands shaking. The chef barked at her to get back to work, but she couldn't. Not with him sitting there, ordering whiskey, as if he owned the world. As if he owned her. When she finally forced herself back out, his eyes followed her every step. He didn't approach, didn't speak. He didn't have to. His silence screamed louder than words. By the time his men settled the bill, her heart was pounding so hard, she thought it might crack her ribs. And when she checked the counter afterward, she found it, an envelope, her name written in bold, precise strokes. Inside was a single black rose petal. Amara wanted to scream.
To run.
To vanish from this city altogether. But Seoul was her chance, her dream, her escape from a past she couldn't face. She wouldn't throw it away, because of him. So she buried herself in routines, classes, work, library, sleep. She avoided crowded alleys, changed her routes home.
Still, he appeared.
At the bus stop, standing across the street. In the library, a silhouette in the upper balcony. On the subway platform, surrounded by men in black who never let anyone come too close. Always watching. Always waiting. At night, she locked her door twice, shoved a chair under the knob, whispered prayers in Igbo before shutting her eyes. But sleep brought no peace. Only the memory of his voice. It happened. And now you're mine. Jaewon, on the other hand, was restless in a way he hadn't been in years. Women had always come easily, models, heiresses, socialites who craved danger. They bent to his will because they wanted the thrill of a mafia lord's attention. They knew the game, played their parts, and left when told. But Amara? She was fire disguised as fragility. Innocent, trembling, but unyielding in a way that both infuriated and intrigued him.
She had run from him, yes.
She hated him, feared him. But beneath her terror, he had seen something else. That flicker in her eyes that told him she would never truly bow. And that made her unforgettable. He told himself it was temporary, just another curiosity. But each day, he found his thoughts returning to her. Each night, he found his dreams filled with her dark skin against white sheets, her tears, her defiance. She wasn't like the others. And that was dangerous. One evening, Amara returned to her tiny studio apartment. The air smelled faintly of instant noodles and the neighbor's cigarette smoke. She tossed her bag on the floor, exhausted, her muscles aching. As she changed out of her uniform, her hand brushed against something unfamiliar in her bag. Frowning, she pulled it out. A small velvet box. Black. No note, no explanation. Her stomach dropped. She didn't need one. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside lay a pendant. A black rose, delicate and sharp, its petals carved in obsidian stone, the chain thin but strong. It gleamed under the weak bulb of her room like a brand. Her breath caught. She dropped the box as though it had burned her. The pendant clattered to the floor, the rose spinning before settling upright, staring back at her like an omen. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, no, no." She sank to her knees, clutching her chest, tears stinging her eyes. It wasn't just a gift. It was a claim. In the world of the Mafia, she now understood, this was a mark. A warning. A declaration. The Black Rose had chosen her. And there was no escape. Amara didn't sleep that night. She sat in the corner of her bed, hugging her knees, staring at the pendant glinting on the floor. She thought about her mother's voice back home in Nigeria, always telling her to stay strong, to protect herself, to value what could never be returned once lost. She had failed, and now she was drowning in a city where no one knew her name, where her cries would be swallowed by the noise. Her phone buzzed suddenly, startling her. A message from an unknown number. Wear it. Her hands shook so violently she dropped the phone. Her tears fell freely now, because no matter how far she ran, J1 was already there. Watching. Waiting. Owning. The night was quiet in Seoul, but Amara's heart was not. She lay awake, the Black Rose pendant glinting faintly on her desk. She hadn't touched it since she found it, but its presence weighed on her like a curse. Every time she closed her eyes, the past crept in. The reason she had guarded herself so fiercely, the secret she carried like armor. She had not come to Seoul just for education. She had come to run. Back in Nigeria, in the heat of Lagos, her childhood had not been gentle. Her father had left when she was young, her mother working double shifts at a market stall to feed them. By the time Amara turned 15, she had learned the weight of a man's gaze, how it lingered too long, how it threatened even in silence. The worst came from someone who should have been safe. Her mother's boyfriend. He was all smiles in public, but behind closed doors his eyes grew darker. He would corner Amara in the kitchen, brush too close, whisper words that made her stomach churn. One night he tried to take more. She had fought, screamed, kicked. Her mother had walked in just in time, dragging him off her. But the damage had been done, not to her body, but to her soul. From that night on, Amara promised herself she would guard her purity, her body, like a fortress. Not for men, not for marriage, but for herself. It was the only thing she felt she could control in a world that had stolen so much. When she got the scholarship to study in Seoul, she took it without hesitation. A chance to start over. A chance to be far away from the shadows of home. But no matter how far she had run, the ghosts followed. And now, after that night with J1, she felt those walls she had built for years crumble like sandcastles in a storm. She pressed her palms to her eyes, whispering through tears, "Why me? Why again?" Across the city, J1 sat in his penthouse, staring out at the lights of Seoul. The whiskey glass in his hand remained untouched. His men lingered outside the door, but he dismissed them hours ago. He wanted silence, because silence always brought back the memories he hated most. He had not been born a monster. Once, long ago, he had been a boy with dreams. His father had been the chairman of the Black Rose Syndicate, a man feared and respected in equal measure. But power breeds enemies, and betrayal is always closer than family. J1's mother had been gentle, too gentle for the world she had married into. She had shielded him as much as she could, telling him stories at night, humming lullabies while hiding bruises she thought he never saw. But J1 was sharp, even as a child. He noticed. He remembered. The day everything changed, he was 15. A rival family struck. Their house was raided, chaos erupting like fire. J1 remembered his mother's scream, the gunshots, the sight of her falling with blood blooming across her chest. And his father? He hadn't died that night. Worse, he had lived, only to hand J1 over to the very men who had killed his wife, in exchange for a truce. A boy sold like currency. J1 never forgave him. Never forgave the world. The years that followed carved steel into his bones. Beatings, training, blood oaths. He rose through the ranks not by mercy, but by sheer ruthlessness. By 22, he had killed more men than he could count. By 25, he had taken his father's throne by force, strangling the man who had betrayed him with his own hands. And by 30, he was known as the Black Rose, the Mafia lord whose smile was as deadly as his gun. He built walls around his heart, higher than stone, sharper than blades. Women came and went. Allies bowed and betrayed. Enemies died screaming his name. Nothing pierced him. Nothing touched him. Until her. The girl with eyes like fire and skin like midnight silk. The girl who trembled but still met his gaze with defiance. The girl who reminded him of something he thought long buried, innocence. It infuriated him. It fascinated him.
And it terrified him.
Because obsession was weakness, and weakness got you killed. Back in her apartment, Amara tried to push the past away. She opened her Bible, the one her mother had pressed into her hands at the airport. Her fingers traced the faded underlines from verses her mother loved. "God is my refuge and strength," she whispered, her voice breaking. But even as she prayed, the echo of Jaewon's voice intruded. "It happened. And now you're mine." Her tears fell onto the pages, blurring the ink. She hated him. She hated herself for remembering the heat of his skin, the depth of his eyes. She hated the part of her that wasn't sure if she feared him more than she feared the emptiness of being unseen in this foreign city. Because for all the terror he brought, he also brought attention, terrifying, suffocating, but undeniable. And Amara, who had spent her life feeling invisible, wasn't ready for how much that frightened her too. The following morning, Jaewon's right-hand man approached him in the penthouse. "She's resisting," he reported. "Won't wear the pendant. She's been avoiding all our men. Hiding." Jaewon leaned back at his chair, the smirk returning to his lips.
Good.
The man frowned. "Good. She is fire," Jaewon said, swirling the untouched whiskey. "Let her fight. The harder she resists, the deeper she'll fall when she realizes resistance is useless." His words were cold, but in the silence after, his hand clenched around the glass until it cracked. A drop of whiskey slid across his knuckle like blood. Because deep inside, past all the walls and shadows Jaewon knew, he wasn't chasing her just for control. He was chasing her because she reminded him of the boy he used to be, before the blood, before the betrayals. And that made her the most dangerous enemy he had ever faced. The evening air in Seoul was cool, carrying the faint smell of street food, spiced chicken, roasted chestnuts, tteokbokki simmering in red sauce. Students filled the sidewalks with laughter, neon lights blinking overhead.
For most, it was an ordinary night.
For Amara, it was another battle to breathe. She walked quickly, her tote bag pressed to her side, eyes darting left and right. After classes, she had worked a late shift at the restaurant, and now the streets were thinner, the shadows thicker. Every corner felt like it held him. Every reflection in a glass window made her heart stop. But tonight, it wasn't Jaewon she saw. Two men leaned against the alley wall ahead. Locals. Their laughter was coarse, their eyes already fixed on her as she approached. Amara slowed, her pulse hammering. "Hey," one called, his voice thick with drink. "Where you from, pretty girl?" She kept walking, clutching her bag tighter. "Don't ignore us," the other sneered, stepping into her path. He reeked of soju and cigarettes. "Black beauty, eh? You studying here? Or working at nightclubs?" Amara's chest tightened. She tried to move past, but one grabbed her wrist. "Let me go," she hissed, yanking back. He chuckled, tugging her closer. So feisty. Her throat closed with panic. Memories of Lagos, of hands that had once reached for her in dark rooms, flooded back. Her body froze, fear rising like a tide. And then it happened, swift, violent, undeniable. The man's grip on her wrist vanished as he was slammed into the wall with bone-cracking force. The other stumbled back, eyes wide. Jaewon stood between them and Amara, his hand gripping the thug's throat. His expression was calm, but his eyes burned with something feral. "You touched what's mine," he said in Korean, his voice like a blade slicing the night. The man gasped, clawing at Jaewon's grip. His friend lunged, But before he could land a hit, two men in black suits appeared from the shadows. Jae-won's bodyguards. They moved like wolves, striking hard, fast, merciless. Fists cracked against jaws. Bones gave way under steel-toed boots. Within moments, both men were on the ground, groaning, blood spilling onto the dirty pavement. Amara stood frozen, horror twisting her insides. Jae-won released the man's throat and turned, his eyes landing on her. For a moment, the world was silent. Just his gaze pinning her, sharp and unrelenting. Her voice finally broke free. What are you doing here?" "Protecting what's mine," he said, as if it were the simplest truth. Her stomach churned. "I'm not yours." His lips curved into a cold smile. He stepped closer, brushing invisible dust from her sleeve as though the thug's touch had stained her. "The moment you stepped into my bed, you became mine. That's how it works in my world." Amara recoiled, clutching her bag to her chest. "I didn't choose that. I never wanted." Her voice cracked. Tears burned behind her eyes. "You took everything from me. Don't you see that?" For the first time, his expression shifted, just slightly. A flicker, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. But it was there. Still, his voice stayed cold. "You'd rather they had you? Used you? Left you in an alley bleeding?" He tilted his head, watching her tears fall. "I won't let that happen. Not while you carry my mark." Her fists trembled at her sides. "I don't want your mark. I don't want your protection. I want my life back." His jaw tightened. For a heartbeat, his mask cracked. But then he leaned down, his breath brushing her ear, his words final and merciless. "You don't get to choose anymore." Her body shook. Rage and fear warred inside her. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something that terrified her more than his violence: conviction. He believed what he said. Truly, deeply believed it. The thugs on the ground groaned again. One tried to crawl away, but Jae-won's men stopped him with a brutal kick. Amara flinched, ball rising in her throat. "Stop," she cried, her voice breaking. She turned to Jae-won, desperate. "Please, don't kill them. Please." For a long moment, he simply watched her. Then, with a flick of his hand, he signaled his men to step back. The thugs, battered and bloodied, scrambled into the darkness. Amara exhaled shakily, relief flooding her chest. But when she looked back at Jae-won, his eyes had softened, not with mercy, but with curiosity. "You plead for them," he murmured, "even after they tried to hurt you." Her lips trembled. "Because I'm not like you." For once, he didn't smirk. His gaze lingered on her face, as if trying to memorize the way her tears caught the neon glow. Then he stepped closer, cupping her chin in his hand. "You will be," he said quietly. "Sooner or later, you'll understand my world. You'll stop fighting it. You'll stop fighting me." Amara wrenched her face away, her voice breaking. "I'll never be like you." But her words only seemed to fuel him. His smirk returned, dangerous and certain. "Then you'll be mine exactly as you are." He turned, signaling to his men. They melted back into the shadows as swiftly as they'd come. Jae-won lingered, his eyes sweeping over her trembling form one last time. "Go home, Amara," he said, his tone final. "And remember, the black rose protects what belongs to it." Then he was gone, leaving her alone in the alley with her pounding heart and trembling knees. She sank to the ground, pressing her palms against the cold pavement, her breath coming in ragged gasps. He had saved her, but not out of kindness, not out of love, out of ownership. And for the first time, Amara realized the truth that terrified her most. Jae-won wasn't just her nightmare. He was her shadow. Amara couldn't sleep. The clock on her dorm room wall ticked past 2 in the morning, but her eyes remained wide open, fixed on the ceiling. Every time she closed them, the night replayed in pieces, the thug's hands on her wrist, the sound of bones cracking under fists, Jae-won's voice like fire. "Protecting what's mine." She turned, curling into herself, pressing her knees against her chest. She wanted to hate him, She wanted to scream at the memory of his smirk, at the coldness in his eyes when he declared she had no choice. But she couldn't deny it either. If he hadn't been there, if his men hadn't appeared, she shook the thought away, angry at herself.
No.
I don't need him. I don't want him. Still, her heart refused to settle. Somewhere deep inside, buried under the terror, was something else, something she didn't want to name. The next morning, Seoul bustled as usual. Students streamed through campus, groups chatting over coffee, vendors calling out their specials. Amara walked faster than usual, her hood pulled low, her tote bag clutched tightly against her side. But she could feel it. The eyes. At first, she thought she was imagining it, paranoia clinging from last night. Then she saw him. One of Jaewon's men. Black suit, sunglasses, the same ones who had beaten those thugs, standing across the street, pretending to check his phone. Another shadow trailed behind her when she stopped for breakfast kimbap. By the time she reached her lecture hall, she spotted a third. They didn't speak. They didn't come close. But they were always there. Her chest tightened. She wanted to feel anger. Instead, she felt safer. And that scared her more than anything. By the weekend, the tension inside her had reached breaking point. She skipped her shift, skipped her friends' invites, and walked aimlessly through the streets of Itaewon, where cultures collided, where foreigners blended with locals. For a moment, it felt easier to breathe. Here, she wasn't stared at as much. Here, her skin didn't mark her as loudly. She bought herself a hotdog from a street vendor, biting into the sweet syrup-filled pancake as she sat on a bench under glowing lanterns. For a few minutes, she let the warmth spread through her chest. Enjoying the night? The voice was low, smooth, unmistakable. Amara stiffened, her head whipping around. Jaewon stood a few feet away, dressed in a simple black coat instead of his usual sharp suits. But even without the armor of his Mafia image, his presence drew every eye, pulled the air tighter. Her fingers clenched around the half-eaten hotdog. You're following me again. He tilted his head, stepping closer. Correction. I'm watching over you. Her laugh came bitter and sharp. Like some twisted guardian angel? His lips curved faintly. Guardian devil, maybe. She rolled her eyes, shoving the food into her bag. I don't need either. I'm fine on my own. You weren't fine last night. His voice cut through, soft but sharp. If I hadn't been there. I don't need you, she snapped, her voice louder than she meant. A few passers-by glanced at them before moving on. Her chest rose and fell with rage. You think saving me makes up for everything else you've done? You broke me, Jaewon. You don't get to be my savior now. For once, his smirk faltered. He studied her face, his expression unreadable. Then, quietly, almost too quietly. And yet you're still breathing, because of me. Her throat closed. Her anger faltered, tangled with guilt, with confusion, with the truth she didn't want to admit. Why me? She whispered, her voice breaking. You could have anyone, any girl in this city. Why won't you leave me alone? For a moment, he didn't answer. The night around them buzzed with voices, with music spilling from bars, with the hum of neon lights. Then he stepped closer, so close she could see the faint scar near his jaw, the shadows under his eyes. Because you don't fear me the way others do, he murmured. You fight me. You look at me like I'm still human. Her chest tightened painfully. You're not, she whispered back. Maybe not, he said, his gaze locking on hers. But when you're near, I almost believe I could be. The air between them thickened, charged, pulling at something Amara didn't want to name. Her heart betrayed her, beating faster not with terror this time, but with something dangerously close to longing. She pulled back, shaking her head. You're insane. He didn't stop her as she turned to leave, didn't call her back. But his voice followed, low and certain. You can hate me, Amara. You can curse me, but you'll never escape me. She walked faster, her eyes stinging with tears. And though every step carried her away, her heart felt caught in invisible chains. Because she hated him. But she didn't feel safe without him. Amara's days became a prison of routine. wake up. Classes.
Work.
Home.
Repeat.
But no matter where she went, shadows followed. Jaewon's men, always near, never speaking. Sometimes she caught their reflections in shop windows. Other times, she felt their stares from across the street. She hated it. She hated the invisible chains he wrapped around her life. But beneath the hate, a darker truth clawed at her. She no longer felt safe without them. And that terrified her most of all. One cold evening, she left her tutoring job late. The streets were quieter than usual, neon signs flickering against the drizzle. Her umbrella tilted in the wind, her boots splashing through puddles. She walked faster, hoping to catch the last train. Then she noticed it. The men in black suits, Jaewon's usual shadows, were gone. Her heart skipped. She glanced over her shoulder. The street was empty. Too empty. Her steps quickened. That's when a van screeched to a stop in front of her. Doors flung open. Rough hands grabbed her, yanking her inside before she could scream. Her umbrella clattered to the wet ground, left behind like a broken wing. "Let me go." Amara thrashed, nails clawing, feet kicking. But they were stronger. A hand clamped over her mouth, the stench of cigarettes filling her nose. The van roared to life, swallowing the night. They blindfolded her. Rope bit into her wrists. Her body trembled, every nerve screaming. Foreign voices muttered in Korean, harsh, mocking. She didn't know all the words, but she understood enough. Boss won't like this. She's just a girl. She's his weakness. We take her, we take him. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't random. This was about Jaewon. Hot tears slid down her cheeks beneath the blindfold. She thought of Nigeria, of her mother's lullabies, of Lagos streets where danger had always worn familiar faces. She had left to escape pain, to build a new life. Now she was trapped again, prey in someone else's game. When the blindfold was ripped away, she found herself in a warehouse. Rusted steel beams loomed overhead. The smell of oil and blood clung to the air. Men circled, some smoking, others cleaning knives. At the center stood one with sharp eyes and a cruel smile. "Amara, isn't it?" he said in accented English, rolling her name on his tongue as though tasting it. "The foreign flower our black rose can't stop watering." Her lips parted, but no sound came. He crouched before her, tilting her chin with 2 fingers. "Pretty.
Exotic. Different.
I see why he keeps you." She jerked her head away, glaring. The man laughed. "You have fire.
Good.
Let's see if your fire makes him bleed." Hours blurred. Fear pressed heavy, cold, suffocating. Amara's wrists ached, her throat raw from silent prayers. She thought of Jaewon, of the way he had declared her his, of the black rose pendant slipped into her things. She hated him, but right now, he was the only person who could save her. The sound came first, distant engines. Then, the thunder of doors slamming, footsteps storming the warehouse. Gunfire erupted. Shouts in Korean. Men dropped one by one, blood painting the floor. Amara's heart pounded as chaos raged around her. She pressed against the chair, trying to disappear. Then he appeared. Jaewon. Black coat whipping like wings, eyes burning, a pistol steady in his hand. He moved like a storm, merciless, precise. Every bullet found its mark. Every enemy fell before they could touch him. The rival boss tried to flee, but Jaewon's bullet tore through his leg, dropping him with a scream. And then silence, broken only by Amara's shuddering breaths. Jaewon crossed the blood-soaked floor, his boots echoing. He crouched, cutting her ropes with a swift flick of his knife. She flinched at his touch. His eyes softened, just barely. "You're safe now." Safe. The word felt like a lie in this place of death. Yet when his hand brushed hers, she clung to him, trembling, because the truth was worse. Without him, she wouldn't be alive. He pulled her against him, holding her tightly, as though she were the only piece of light in his world of shadows. But when she dared look up, her stomach twisted. His face was splattered with blood. His smile was gone. This was the real Jaewon.
And she had just seen it.
the devil who owned her. Back at her dorm, she scrubbed her skin raw in the shower, but the stench of iron clung. Her reflection in the mirror looked foreign, eyes wide, lips trembling. She remembered the sound of bones breaking, of men begging for mercy. Jaewon's voice, cold and calm as he pulled the trigger. He had saved her, but at what cost? A knock startled her. She wrapped a towel around herself, stepping carefully to the door. His voice drifted through. Amara. Her heart froze. You're mine, he said softly, like a vow, like a curse. No one will touch you, not while I breathe. She pressed her forehead to the door, tears slipping down. She wanted to scream at him, to push him out of her life. But all she whispered to the empty air was, "Then why do I feel like I'm already dying?"
Part 2 dropping soon. Do well to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss it.